Good afternoon, this is Terry from the Frugal Connection. Grocery prices are going up every time we walk in the grocery store, and it can be quite disconcerting to go and just keep seeing the prices rising. However, there are a few ways that we can save some money, and one of those ways is by not spending money on expensive seasoning mixes that come in a tiny little packet and are way overpriced and have a bunch of added ingredients. And the reason I'm doing this is that I know grocery prices are going up and we have no control over that. And it can be scary, a little bit scary when you go to the grocery store and just see prices rising and rising and rising. But there are things within our control that we can do. And one of those things is making as much as possible at home from scratch. Today, I want to invite you along with me as we put together 4 different seasoning mixes. The first one we're going to start with is a taco seasoning mix. Now, I've made this for years and I don't even purchase taco seasoning anymore because I find this taste exactly the same, and yet I know what's going into it. I can control the ingredients, and there's no hidden surprises. So what we're going to start with is I'm going to just get a clean jar here, and I am going to double this recipe just so that I have it on hand. And you don't have to double it if you don't want to. You can actually make quite a bit more, but I'm just going to start with that. So the first thing we need is 2 teaspoons of instant minced onion. Now I am going to, because I'm doubling this, I'm going to put in 4 teaspoons of this, which is also equivalent to 1 tablespoon. So I could have just put the tablespoon in. Okay. And now we're going to also use 2 teaspoons of salt. So let me get my salt out. Because I don't use a lot of salt in my cooking, I am not going to double the salt. I'm just going to use 1 teaspoon of salt in this. I have 2 teaspoons of chili powder. One teaspoon of crushed red chili flakes. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Also calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano and 1 teaspoon of cumin and a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And it also calls for 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. I just put the lid on and I'm going to give it a good mix. And there we have it. This is our first spice seasoning, taco seasoning, and this makes 2 servings. Okay friends, we're going to move on to our next seasoning mix, and this one is Sloppy Joe seasoning mix. Okay friends, the next one we're going to make is Sloppy Joe seasoning mix. Now I just want to let you know I will post these recipes on my website, thefrugalconnection.com. I'll put the link down below in the description box so it will take you right where I have the recipes posted. Now I eat plant-based whole foods, so I haven't eaten Sloppy Joes in a long time, but my family still likes a few of those family favorites. They will generally eat anything I make for them, but they definitely like meat, so I will make some of their favorites every now and then, and Sloppy Joes is one of them. I'm gonna add this, grab this jar, and again, I'm gonna double this just because it saves me some work. Why do it multiple times when I can just double it once and then we'll be done? So this one calls for minced onion, and I am going to put in here 2 tablespoons, but what I'm going to use is 2 teaspoons of salt, Okay, so this also calls for the 2 teaspoons of salt. That's with a doubled recipe. it calls for 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, because again, we're adding the cornstarch to a couple of these because it will thicken it up as you're cooking it. And then I need a teaspoon of garlic powder. I need a half a teaspoon of dry mustard. Oops. Okay. And a half a teaspoon of celery seed. And a half a teaspoon of chili powder. There you have it. There's the next one. So this is Sloppy Joe seasoning mix. Okay, the next one we're gonna make is poultry seasoning. And I have purchased poultry seasoning in the store. I've made my own, and I gotta tell you, the homemade is far superior. And I think mostly because the poultry seasoning that you purchase in the store has salt in it, and it always tastes so salty to me, like overly salted. So what we're gonna do is we're making our own. I'm not adding any salt to mine. If you want some salt in it, you can put in a teaspoon of salt as well. And this one is super easy. Again, I have a jar. I'm just storing mine in a mason jar. You can use whatever container you have. And I have 1 tablespoon of sage. Now this sage I grew in my garden and I ground it up myself. I do store it in my freezer because the thing with sage is that it can go moldy, especially if you're not, you know, I dry mine, but you have to be really careful with it because it takes a long time for all that moisture to get out. And if there's even a hint of moisture when you're trying to dry it, it will end up molding on you. And you can ask me how I know that. Now we're also going to use a tablespoon of rosemary, dried rosemary, a tablespoon of sage, sorry, not sage, a tablespoon of thyme. And again, this thyme is from my garden. And then we have a tablespoon of marjoram. We have 1 tablespoon of celery seed. And then I'm going to use 3/4 of a tablespoon of black pepper. This is another way that I save a little bit of money. If I buy whole peppercorns, and this has less to do about saving money and more to do about freshness, what I do is I buy whole black peppercorns, and I have a little coffee grinder, and then I will just grind them up when I get home and store them myself, because I really never know how long some spices have been on the shelf in the grocery stores. And I just find with black pepper, it tastes so much better when it's fresh ground, but I don't want to have to go through the hassle of grinding it every single time I want to use it. So instead, I just put it in my coffee grinder, grind it to the consistency I want, and then store it in a little mason jar. And there you go. This is our poultry seasoning. Ugh, it smells so good. Okay, the last mix that we're gonna make is a shake and bake mix. Now, in the grocery store, if you're purchasing one of those boxes that say shake and bake on them, I would just do away with that. You don't need to do that at all. It is so easy to make your own at home. And again, I eat plant-based whole foods, but I do cook some meat-based meals for my family. And one of the things that they like is pork chops in the oven that I use a shake and bake seasoning mix with, but I make my own when I do that. I'm gonna double it just because while I have all the ingredients out, it just makes sense to me to go ahead and do that. So what you need for this is you need, now the regular recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of flour, but I am gonna put 4 tablespoons in here since I am doubling it. And then I'm gonna do an equal amount of cornmeal. So I'm gonna put 4 tablespoons of cornmeal in my jar. I'm going to grab my salt. I'm going to do two teaspoons of salt. 2 teaspoons of onion powder. 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. 2 teaspoons of dried thyme. And again, this is from my garden this past summer. So I had a little herb garden and I just dried the herbs. And then 2 teaspoons of sage. And I'm measuring it, but they're a little heaping, which is okay. And then I'm going to use a half a teaspoon of black pepper. All right. And all I'm going to do is close this up, give it a good shake. Now, when you're ready to use this, what you do is you take a freezer bag, you put your pork chops in the freezer bag. This is for pork. You put your pork chops in the freezer bag. Because I doubled this recipe, I'm only going to use half of this, which is going to be about a third of a cup. And I'm going to add that to the bag with the pork chops. I'm going to seal it up, and then I just give it a good shake, shaking it and making sure the meat is coated on all sides. And then I take it out, put it on a lined baking sheet, and bake it in the oven. So there you have it. We have 4 different spice mixes that only took a couple of seconds to put together. We had taco seasoning mix, sloppy Joe seasoning mix, poultry seasoning mix, and a shake and bake, a pork for pork. Shake and bake for pork. So I hope that helps you see how easy it is to just put together your own seasoning mixes using the spices you already have in your kitchen without having to go to the store, without having to purchase overpriced seasoning mix packets that also have a ton of added ingredients in it that sometimes we're not sure what is in there. And it will save you a few pennies. I mean, in this day and age, we got to find ways to save money any way we can. And so I hope you will give one of these a try. Like I mentioned, I will put it down below in the description box, the link to my website, thefrugalconnection.com, where you can find all these recipes. I think there's another one on that same blog post that you'll find there. And give it a try. See how it goes. And I'm going to continue to do these type of videos where I show you how to make and save a little bit of money each time you go to the grocery store. That's the part of the budget we can control somewhat. We can control what we purchase and how we use it and how we prepare the food. So I hope you're having a great day. I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.